So Dawn joins us from a few months back. We had this conversation and trust came up, and all of a sudden it was, you got to talk to Dawn. Okay, right, Jared, you and I were talking with somebody else, and all of a sudden the trust conversation came up.
So we trusted them that their information was good.
Yeah, yeah, we trusted them. So Dawn, we're going to turn this over to you and look forward to your thoughts about trust, speed of trust, how to build it and keep it.
Absolutely. All right, so let me go ahead and share screen again. You should be seeing the waves of trust at the top and my name and info. Everybody see that? I am curious, before I jump into this, when you say the topic of trust came up, what frame of reference? How did it come up?
You're on mute, Al.
Al, you're on mute. By the way, you can all unmute for this one because I'm going to be asking you to engage.
So it came up, Dawn, of how to do business with people, and whatever marketing tactic you were using or sales technique you were using. It seemed like the unwritten part, the hard to quantify part, was trust.
Ah, okay. Well, and that's very true. That's very true. So just a little bit about me, my background is in the HR and talent development world. I've been doing that for probably 30 years, but only because I started when I was 5. Okay. But I specialize in leadership and team development, and I work mostly in emotional intelligence. That's where I have multiple certifications. And I spend a lot of time working with leaders on their executive presence. And trust specifically is definitely an emotional intelligence competency, and it's certainly a factor in your executive presence. So I do a lot of work with trust as well. And several years ago, I was certified to train on the Covey materials for the Speed of Trust book, which I know at least Hal, one of you has a copy of this, but we'll see if I can get it to work with my virtual background. Maybe not. Oh, well, anyway, Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey, wrote a book on trust, and he'd spent a lot of time actually studying what breeds trust. And so the book is a great demonstration of an explanation of where trust really comes from and how do you sustain it. So what I'd like to do is ask you, I'm going to do just a quick overview of leading at the speed of trust, which was the course that I trained. It's like, how do you show up as a leader and be trustworthy? And if you all run your own businesses, you know that you are a leader of your business, right? And you are a leader with your clients. So this is very relevant, I think, to all of us. The famous quote you'll hear from Stephen Covey is, nothing is as fast as the speed of trust. And we'll get into more as to why that's true. But based on some of the interactions I've already heard, you guys get it. You know how trust is really important, and it has such an impact in what we do. So I'm going to ask you to write in the chat. The first thing is just think of somebody you trust and put their first name in the chat. That's it, just their first name. Okay, and I'm sure when you thought of who it is you trust, there were some reasons there. Now I'm going to ask you a different question. If you were incapacitated for, let's say, a month or so, and you needed someone to service your clients, who would you trust? First name only. Put that in your chat. Okay. Who would you trust with your money? Who would you give your PIN for your bank accounts and your investments? First name only. Now think about who would you trust with your pet when you went on vacation to take care of your pet? Or if anyone still has young children, who would you trust to take care of them?
That's not a fair thing to compare.
We'll pick one.
I'm going to assume my wife's going on that vacation with me. So
There you go. All right, so here's a question. Did the same name show up for all of your answers?
No.
Nope.
Oh.
Why not?
some were personal, some were business.
Mhm.
But isn't trust trust?
Knowledge too. So some have different knowledge of things.
Yeah,
Ah, so trust is actually contextual, is it not?
right.
We trust for certain things, and depending on what we need from someone, that's the basis, the lens of trust that we look at, right? That we use. So now I'm going to turn the tables just a little bit and ask you to look in the mirror. And if I were to ask those same people that you just listed, if they trust you for the various things, would your name come up? Would they put you as the person they trust?
Yeah.
We think so?
So,
So somebody's going to give us access to their bank accounts.
I like where Jared was going. We've been married long enough that I hope so.
Yeah, levels of context, right? I actually did this activity with somebody a while back and they did not list their wife. In fact, they listed nobody. They say, I wouldn't trust anybody with my pen.
Wow.
So it's definitely different for everyone. But the takeaway from this is that trust is contextual. So you have to think about, what am I looking for from this relationship, and what do I need to base my trust on? And we were talking before we got started about how some people will extend trust automatically, while others feel like you need to earn trust over time. And people are all along that spectrum as to where they fall with that. So I'm just curious, by a show of hands, let me get my screen big again. How many of you are those that you will trust without question? And then if you give me a reason not to, okay, now we have an issue. So how many of you, let's just show of hands, trust without needing any, okay, no proof. How many of you lean more towards, let's build some trust. It takes a little time. Put your hands. Yeah. Okay. So and then there's people that are sort of in the middle. So everybody's different. And why is that important? Why is that knowledge important when you are looking to work with new clients or keep existing relationships?
Got to know where they stand.
Yeah. If you know someone needs you to build trust and you're the kind of person that just extends trust, you can't approach it assuming they're going to just trust you. You have to understand that you need to build that trust, right? And vice versa. If you think that they're going to require trust from you, but they're like, no, you're good. You can move things differently, more quickly, probably, right? So it would change how you show up. So this is how Covey defines trust. Basically, it's a verb and a noun, and it says confidence is born of the character and competence of a person or an organization. So they're relating trust to confidence. And just like you said earlier, I'm consistent. Well, that consistency breeds confidence because the brain likes predictability. And when there's predictability, the emotional side of our brain is calm. And if you think about it, it says, the opposite of trust is suspicion. Well, what's suspicion really? Underneath there is fear, right? So that's why we think of trust as a huge emotional intelligence competency, because it is the absence of fear. And we don't have fear, what opens up for us? All kinds of possibilities. So how many of you remember traveling in the 90s, air travel in the 90s? What was that like? How soon could you get to the airport before your flight?
30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
That depends, yeah.
5 minutes.
Yes. I used to do the OJ through the airport on many occasions, trying to get to my flight and just barely go on in time. Not so much now. What happened after 9/11?
I'm gonna, yeah,
Go ahead.
no, nothing. That's okay.
What happened after 9/11?
More security.
Yeah. Now, how long do we have to? How much of a lead time do we have to have before we get to the airport?
2 hours.
Hours.
Yeah, a couple hours.
Yeah. So as trust decreases, the speed of doing business also decreases, and the cost of doing business increases. Think about in your own world. This is what Covey calls a trust tax. In your own world, think of where you've got an example of that. Who can think of an example?
Well, I know on my side, if we don't have trust with something as a client, they want to vet it out, 2 or 3 different, they want to bid it out 2 or 3 different times, which takes, weeks and months. And, the cost actually, while for me, it goes down because that means, you make less money off of it. So it's basically like, it's an inverse relationship. Yeah.
Okay. Who else?
Maybe I'll mention an example. For us, it's in some ways it's similar because basically the sales cycle is usually pretty long. There's lots of steps. So in some ways, I could say that having someone being the bridge reduces the number of steps to get to that closure, get to that signing of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then I'm sure you realize that conversely, when we have high trust, it speeds up our ability to do business and it decreases cost. So I'll give you an example from my end. When I first started working, I've got a client, a CEO of a bank and his executive team. When I first started working with them, every 3 months, it was, okay, here's the hours I've tracked with you guys and here's your invoice. Now I submit them an invoice every 6 months, no questions asked, no hours tracked. They trust. They know that I'm going to be, I have the high integrity of how I'm going to be watching the hours I spend and that I'm not going to overcharge them. So it's just an easier way of doing business. Can you think of examples in your own world where you have high trust and it makes your life easier, your business works faster, less cost?
I'll jump in because I think there's something similar to what Anthony does where it's a new idea. Anthony's got a new product, and helping people understand what the product is. If they already understand it, either from another meeting or somebody else, when they understand the product, then we jump forward in the process.
Yeah.
We save time. And I did want to say that I thought when Scott brought up his comment about the price goes down, I would think almost that the cost, the transaction cost might go down, but the overall relationship cost went up, right? You got more risk.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's the cost typically their cost goes down, my cost goes up. It's almost like the price is kind of pinches me. So it's kind of maybe overall like.
Yeah. So your cost actually go up.
Yeah.
Your cost of doing business. Yeah. So we definitely want to look for the trust taxes and the dividends and how we can manage those. To give you a broader look at what the whole book is about, the speed of trust is not just about the fact that, when you have trust, the speed of doing business increases and cost goes down, but it is a complex topic that starts with self-trust. And then there are waves of trust that ripple out from there. So self-trust is all about 2 things. One, do you trust yourself to be able to carry through on things and commitments? And can others trust you? Do you have the credibility? And then in relationships, can others trust you in your interactions? There's 13 different high trust behaviors that Covey recommends for you to sustain a strong relationship. Organizational trust is about having the processes and procedures in place that make it easy to do business with you. Like Amazon how easy is it to do business with Amazon, right? And returns are like that. So it's just, you trust them because you know you can order through Amazon and be able to return with no problem if you don't like it. Market trust. Does the market trust you? When they see your name, your business name or your logo, do they have positive feelings? Like if you see Google, you trust Google. You see Walmart, you know what they stand for, right? And how about societal trust? Does society believe that you are there to do good, that you're going to make contributions to society? You know, back in, was it 92 when they had the Rodney King riots and LA just got devastated by everybody just, you know, blazing all the businesses everywhere but one, McDonald's. McDonald's was not touched in that community. And they asked the community why, and they said, because they support us. They support our literacy programs. They support our sports programs. They give people a job. So we know we can trust them. So they weren't touched. So are you giving back in some way? So those are the basic waves of trust, if you will, that Covey spends time talking about, and how you can be careful to protect your brand and be trusted. So, and I know we're short on time, so I'm going to stop there and say, what kind of questions do we have from the group?
All right, so we're going to open that up. Questions about how do you build trust?
I mean, we're in the language business. Trust is a huge factor because most clients don't speak all the languages we translate into. So one of the very first things that we decided as a business was to get our ISO certification. So we felt that if we have this stamp of approval from ISO, having an ISO standard, that will go a long way in reducing that time you need to build trust.
So Uli, is that fair to say that it's a third-party recommendation?
Yeah, not just recommendation, but certification audit, you know, just like.
Yeah, I think people trust you when you got letters after your name and things like that. I know that sounds funny, but when you have a designation or a certification, it just adds to it. Don, I'm curious about something. I tried to find when I was doing trivia. I tried to find an answer to this, but you know, they always say it's easier to retain customers than get new ones, so that's always good. How about rebuilding trust? Like if you lose somebody's trust, is it exponentially harder to regain?
No, it doesn't have to be. In fact, there's research from the customer service industry that shows that if you mess up with a client and you regain their trust, they're going to be more loyal than they were if you had never messed up. So there's a lot of value in that. In fact, Covey has a process. It's on one of your cards, Hal. They have a process for how do you rebuild trust with someone you've lost trust with. And it basically always involves you being really transparent about, you know, let me fix this mistake. That's one of the high trust behaviors, is being able to correct mistakes and admit that you've made them. So, but that's a great question.
Yeah, I couldn't find any real stats on that. Sorry, Mark.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny. I, back in the early 90s, I had a relationship with an individual. She was a graphic designer, and she sent a project over to us. I priced the project once it was done, and then she called me back and said, well, I got an estimate for this project, and it's $300 less than what you invoiced me for. And I took the credit for making the mistake. I adjusted the invoice, and it just so happened that she was an independent graphic designer, but she actually worked for Wachovia Bank at the time. And Wachovia Bank ended up being, over the lifetime of that relationship, was close to $1 million in printing over about a 10-year period. But it was because I admitted that I made a mistake. I didn't put the blame on the individual that gave the estimate previously. I took all the blame. I wrote her a note apologizing. I sent a little gift card for her inconvenience. And then we started redeveloping that relationship again. And it all comes back to basically taking responsibility. And I think that is a big part of trust, is saying, yeah, I screwed up, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. So
That's a great example. Well, and think about how we feel, right? If somebody owns up to something to us that they've made a mistake,
correct.
definitely increases our trust bank with them.
Yeah, we had a similar situation in IT where we had a customer who, you know, was in an IT situation or a real bad situation that wasn't really our responsibility to support or to fix. But we maybe at best we could have noticed the problem and didn't. But that didn't matter. We moved right past. They wanted to get really into like the blame game. We skipped all of that and went right to the problem, and said, "Yeah, it's okay. Like we're gonna help you fix this." And that, I think, the struggle or it's like, I don't know, being in a foxhole with somebody. With, you know, you build a relationship. I can go to that customer in the beginning and make promises about what we're going to do in the future if something bad happens, and they believe me. But if they're in that situation and I'm there, or my engineers are there, that kind of trust, I can't earn that in the conference room. Like I can only earn that like in the heat of battle.
Right.
I'm curious, before we run out of time, JD is somebody, you tend to work with larger groups of people where there's lots of interactions going on. And I'm curious, with what you're doing, where you're encouraging people to give short responses about colleagues, how do you trust people aren't ambushing you or something, sabotaging you?
That's one of the things, gaming the system. I think the frequency becomes acceptance of feedback. With breadth of feedback, meaning not just the large amount from a single person, but if you're coming from across a large swath of people, if you're constantly saying JD's a jerk because he doesn't like me, but suddenly you find out that JD's not so bad because 27 other people have also said not so positive things about you, it tends to help that out. So if I increase the feedback from not just your manager to 3 other people, yeah, you could still be shot down by somebody in a smaller group. But if I can extend that range out to people that meet with you frequently, people that meet with you infrequently, and then blend that information to start giving you a picture, we look at trying to help individuals, not to pose people against each other to say, oh, you're scoring better or doing better. It's how am I doing in my internal life and my goals that I'm working towards, and how can I make myself perform better or fix those things. So
what's interesting that you bring up is quantity also helps, which I guess we could all say Google reviews and other things would go with JD, what you're talking about, of getting more feedback from individuals. When you were asking that question, like who's the one person, there's a huge amount of trust, in that one individual. And what I'm hearing for all of us is that we can be building little pieces of trust from a lot of people, so that there's not one person that's, all the infamous, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So Dawn, anything you want to say before as we wrap up?
No, just thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I'm just thrilled. Anytime somebody wants to talk about EQ or trust or any of those things, I'm always happy to have that conversation.
All right. Well, to have that conversation, here's Dawn's contact information, or you can find Jared and I, and we're glad to introduce you. Quick heads up for what's coming up next. And of course, one more laugh at the end. Coming up, how to survive federal tax changes. Our friends from the Small Business Development Center talking about Where's Waldo market research that's available to all of us. And they give it away as part of the Small Development Center. So what's going on with that? The right way to express appreciation for referral sources in a few weeks. So you can see the conversations that are coming up. look forward to your feedback and conversations then. Feel free to bring a friend. And Dawn, thanks so much again for sharing some good insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you,
All right,
Dawn.
guys,
Thank you,
make it a
guys.
great
Thank you,
week.
guys.
Have a
Thank you.
good
Thanks,
day.
everyone.
Bye.
Appreciate it, everybody.
Appreciate it, guys.